ladies and gentlemen, I am your man on Film Michael J Migliore, and I went to a haunted theater so that I can talk about The Conjuring. The devil made me do it. I was at a Walgreens around my neighborhood one evening purchasing essentials like hair product, dry skin lotion, and packs of highly sought after Pokemon cards. While perusing their literature section, the small book rack hanging at the end of the antihistamine aisle, I was drawn to this book, Ghost Stories of Broward County. As if led by some unseen force along a hidden trail, I read about countless tales of the supernatural. It was then that I discovered the story of a haunted theater. Imagine my shock to learn that the haunted theater was in fact local theater I've gone for years. A little bit of redaction. It may or may not have been the actual theater I went to, but for the sake of the story, let's say, for the sake of YouTube and content, let's say that yes, it was. So naturally, this had to be the perfect place to go see The Conjuring. The Devil Made Me Do It, or Conjuring 3 as you would like to call it. The latest film in James Wan's Conjureverse, Warrenverse, Wanverse, jump scare verse. I don't know what kind of kitschy term we could use for that, but the series of Conjuring films and their spin-offs. The Conjuring series follows the based on a true story exploits of Ed and Lorraine Warren, the controversial couple that arguably popularized paranormal investigation, exorcisms, and ghost hunting in the 70s and 80s. There is a fair amount of controversy surrounding them, their work, and the legacy they left behind, which we will discuss later on in the video. For now, let's talk about the Ed and Lorraine Warren as characters in what has become an incredibly popular horror series. A horror series that has spawned 8 films in as many years, with a couple more in the pipeline. The big appeal to these series, well, the big appeal to specifically the Conjuring portion of the ever-growing James Wan horror cinescape, is the based on actual events tagline that start each Conjuring film. The plot of the films are based on the highly publicized cases worked on by the paranormal investigating couple. The gimmick of claiming a film is based on actual events is nothing new, especially in horror film. Psycho, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, both of those took from the real-life story of famed American serial killer Ed Gein, and very apropos, The Exorcist was also inspired by the actual reported exorcism of a 14-year-old boy.
That the power of Christ compels you!
Our story, or that is to say The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, story starts with the possession of the 11-year-old David Glatzel. The Warrens are there praying over the boy and his family while they wait for the priest to arrive to do the rites of exorcism on the 11-year-old boy. The boy's possession reveals itself, and while the Warrens and their family restrain him, he performs some rather spectacular feats of bone-crunching contortionism. The evil spirit-possessed boy pounces on Ed Warren, attacking him with a debilitating heart condition, and in a moment of desperation, the boy's would-be son-in-law, Arnie, demands that the demon take control of his body. And that is the catalyst that sets the whole film in motion. As you see, some days later, Arnie, overcome by some evil, murders his landlord, stabbing him 20-something times. He is arrested, and the Warrens, still intent on helping the family, convinced Arnie's lawyer to plead not guilty by reason of demonic possession. What follows is a compelling courtroom drama where the prosecution and the Warrens introduce evidences proving the existence of the paranormal and that Arnie was not in control of his faculties, but that his will was overcome by a malevolent entity. Well, no. Objection! That doesn't actually happen in the movie. Instead, Ed and Lorraine return to the start of where the possession began, where they find a witch's totem, the sign that the family had been cursed. The origin of this evil turns out to be a very goth daughter of a retired priest who had been dabbling in Satanism, and for no justifiable reason has been cursing people left and right. The film makes the point of saying that there is no justifiable reason as to why she was doing these things. It was simply her creating mayhem for the sake of mayhem. So now, Ed and Lorraine have to find the altar where the curse was performed, destroy it, thus ending the curse before more people, including Ed, dies. As far as the rest of the Conjuring series goes, I really enjoyed the first movie. The second movie, I really liked the visuals and some of the direction, had some very interesting and cool scenes, but overall I felt like it was a lot of the time a little too goofy.
My house!
Goofy in a pretty laughable way. I don't actually think I've seen any of the spin-off films, so pending a rewatch of the first film, I'd say that The Conjuring 3 is probably the best time I've had with a Conjuring movie. And one of the main reasons I feel that way is because they really took it in a different direction. The Conjuring film plays a lot more like a supernatural detective thriller than a straightforward haunted house or possession film. This may turn off staunch fans of the series, but I think it really plays with the charm of the series, which lie in Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga's portrayal of Ed and Lorraine Warren. The film series has always placed their relationship at the center of the narrative. It is their rock and strength that aids them in the battle against paranormal evil, even more so than their faith. This is a choice that has caused a lot of controversy, which I promise you, we will get to shortly. The film series has always presented itself like a real ghost story serial. At the end of all the Conjuring films, there is a scene where Ed files another object into a museum of haunted items. Whenever I see this, it always reminds me and takes me back to the old Friday the 13th TV series. That series, which has basically no connection to the Hockey Mask Friday the 13th film franchise, basically explores the different events surrounding many cursed relics. It was very much more of a haunted detective serial than horror series. That always makes me wonder why they have not serialized the actual Conjuring films into a long-form, binge-watchable formula that has been successful for so many other franchises and so many other properties. It would play much like the Friday the 13th series I mentioned before, or something along the lines of Kolchak the Night Stalker. The Conjuring series, and please understand when I say this, the Conjuring series has developed this lore where Ed and Lorraine Warren are basically Sherlock and Watson of the supernatural. And that is such a cool premise. It could be constantly be expanded on, especially considering the volume of case files and books of the Warrens' exploits that they made. That, along with Wilson and Farmiga's charm and chemistry, is why I always come back to this Conjuring film series and enjoy myself. However, I recognize it's not so easy for some people to feel the same way about this franchise. Apart from how incredibly corny some of the films can be, like the second one,
My house!
there is the issue of the ghost of a pink elephant in the room. Yes, the controversy. Hang on to your crucifixes because this one has got some layers. Right at the jump, there will always be a portion of the film-going public that will find it difficult to accept a film like The Conjuring. Most genre films, especially of the horror variety, by their very nature, asks a lot from their audience when it comes to applying a certain degree of suspension of disbelief. You have to be, at least in some way, open to accepting the narrative that the film is trying to develop. Some people are just unable to watch a film like The Conjuring or something similar because ghosts aren't real. That is your prerogative. Also, I can't imagine how exhausting it must be to have no joy in your life. Honestly, that should go without saying, right? If you don't like a certain type of movie, you don't go watch that type of movie. The real controversy starts there though, and that has to do with the films being based on actual events, and basically how liberally that selling point is thrown around in cinema. Remember Psycho and the American Chainsaw Massacre? None of those stories based on actual events happened in any way in which they were portrayed in the film, but elements of the story were used and adapted to create a brand new narrative. The meat of the controversy surrounding the Conjuring films is how inaccurate its portrayal of Ed and Lorraine Warren is. I have not gotten into it too extensively, so please excuse me if I've left out some details or nuances to the minutia of the story. If you are interested, I do encourage you to do your own research and decide for yourself. I am just providing a bit of context for you, the viewer, to understand where I am coming from and where this controversy lies. There are many people in the occult community and the adjacent skeptical community that kind of lives symbiotically with the occult community who attest that the real Ed and Lorraine Warren were nothing but a couple of con men. Con men and women? Con people? Con folk? Their involvement in known hoaxes like the Amityville haunting, something that was actually addressed in the second film,
My house!
along with accounts of them telling the people who wrote their books, their ghostwriters, on their investigations to basically make a lot of the stuff up. They are seen by many as two people who were able to take advantage of the public's growing interest in the paranormal, and they did so by developing a persona which could easily be sold through the amount of media exposure that they were receiving. That, again, seems rather obvious. In a way, it seems as though I'm just reiterating the fact that, hey, some people just don't believe in ghosts, so naturally people don't believe in the Warrens, who are legit. But the story gets even stickier. After the release of the first film, allegations came out about the Warrens, which called into question the film's depiction of their idyllic lovebird dynamic. The allegations came from a 70-year-old woman at the time who, in a sworn declaration, said she lived with the Warrens for 4 decades. She lived with the Warrens as Ed Warren's teenage lover. This arrangement happening with Lorraine Warren's full knowledge. It's a pretty sordid tale that attacks the character of the real-life Warrens and the loving dynamic portrayed by the on-screen characters of The Conjuring's Ed and Lorraine Warren. There was some back and forth between the alleged victim and movie studio lawyers, which, to my understanding, all the litigation surrounding all of this controversy ultimately led to nothing. And that's just a brief kind of taste of some of the controversies surrounding the Warrens. Again, I don't have a lot of the deep knowledge and understanding of all the intricacies, and I do recommend you do your own research, come to your own conclusions. What to do with this information is really up to you, the audience. For me, I feel that it's pretty clear. Despite Ed and Lorraine Warren being the inspiration for the films, the Ed and Lorraine Warren of the Conjuring films are different characters. That may seem like poor justification. You're entitled to feel that way. But these films are narrative works of fiction and not meant to be accurate biographical representation. And the film, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, makes it pretty clear that much of the events surrounding the court case play out very differently than they do in the film. The actual court case and the alleged possession play a relatively small part of the film, opting more to explore the origins of the satanic curse put on the family and on the Warrens. So, in a quicker summary, I enjoyed The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. As it stands, it may even more than likely be my favorite of the Conjuring films. In that same sense, though, I recognize that the Warrens are pretty controversial figures and that I would argue deserve all the scrutiny and incredulity placed on them. I also understand the characters in these films are very far removed from their real-world counterparts, though. I may never see a Conjuring film the same way again after this new knowledge, but it will be more than likely not affect whether or not I actually enjoy the narrative and the lore that the film has established and created to this point. Thanks again for watching. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. What do y'all think about the Conjuring films? Did you know about the Warrens and their controversy? Would you go to a haunted theater to watch a scary movie? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, I am your man on film, Michael J Migliore. Take care.